Hello and welcome back to the Kalopsia Podcast. I'm your host, Sydney, and I'm so thankful that you guys clicked on this week's video or episode. So, I'd like to preface by saying I've got two fans working on me right now. I apologize. I hope that you can't hear it too badly. But without further ado, let's get into this week's topic, which I wanted to make about why you should fight for you. Now, I feel like this is a continuation of a few of the episodes that I've been kind of doing recently on the podcast, which kind of center around authenticity and finding comfort in knowing that you might be rejected, but it's all building towards that better you, that authentic you, who you really are. Because a lot of us, a lot of the time, we kind of conform and we kind of tend to forget who we really are. We talked about how rejection is redirection and how to gain comfort and become more comfortable with rejection. We also talked about why it's important to be authentic. But now let's talk about reinventing yourself, right? I feel like a lot of the videos I've been seeing recently, or a few TikToks that have popped up for me, are kind of centered around this whole idea of reinventing yourself and discovering yourself, getting rid of the old and discovering the new. You're getting rid of all of your friends, you're getting rid of all of your clothes, you're changing your hair, you're completely reinventing yourself. And at first when I was thinking about this, I was like, okay, what's the danger of it? Because immediately I'm thinking, can it be solely beneficial to reinvent yourself in this way? Is it also posing a risk of losing yourself a bit? If you kind of only see yourself as this sim, I feel like it can be easy to feel unanchored. How can you tell what you're meant to keep and how can you tell what you're meant to let go of? And so I was thinking more and more about this, and something came to mind as well, which is the quote of become unrecognizable. They always say, I'm going to become unrecognizable. They're not going to know who or what hit them. I'm going to be a totally brand new person and a totally new person with new habits and new hobbies and new friends. And they're not going to be able to recognize me. And I thought that quote was really interesting because it's very focused on their perspective of it, right? It's very focused on the outside perspective of it. Can they recognize me? Can they not recognize me? But what about your perspective? What about how you feel about it? And I saw somebody say that it's not about being unrecognizable, but rather it's about becoming recognizable to yourself. And a lot of the time when it comes to this path to finding our most authentic self, I feel like the biggest issue is, who is that authentic me? Who is that person? And how can I find them? So a lot of people will say when you're thinking of reinventing yourself, finding your most authentic self is visualization, and this comes back to the law of attraction. You can make some vision boards. Okay, what do I want my life to look like? What do I want my life to feel like? What do I want my friendships to do for me? Do I want them to make me feel supported? Do I want them to make me feel ambitious? Do I want them to make me feel funny? Do I want them to make me feel academic? You can make all of these decisions, how you want to look, feel, and how you want to think, and the people you want to surround yourself with. That's step one. Now, step two, though, is actually putting that into motion, and that's where it can be more difficult. The reality is that when you are coming into this new version of yourself, once you have that visualization, once you know what you want your life to look like, who you want to surround yourself with, it's inevitable that some of the people who are going to be in that destination reality that parallel you may not be the same people, may not be the same job, may not be the same spaces that you would place yourself in, that you would be a part of, that you would surround yourself with in the current version of you. This reminded me of a podcast I listened to called On Purpose with Jay Shetty. And I heard of him through Khloe Kardashian, surprisingly. Actually, I think he's been on the show before, the Kardashians. And he was a monk, and He has a lot of important life lessons to kind of share, and I really do enjoy his delivery in this podcast episode. I'm forgetting what the episode was called, but it was about facing rejection when it comes to your friends. He opened up the episode by saying, I want to start this business. I want to start this book, this literary journey. I want to start this new project, but I don't feel like the people around me are supporting me. I don't feel like they are buying that first manuscript of my book. I don't feel like they are buying that shirt I made and sharing the link. They are not supporting me in that way. And something he said that was really interesting was that the people around you are less likely to support you and are less likely to see you bringing that reality to life and that new version of you, that new project that you're embarking on. They're less likely to see that vision than a stranger is. And that's because they have internalized this story of what you are capable of. And now when we're taking this in the context of, reinventing yourself and, building this new reality around yourself, the people who are in your life already have their predisposed notions of who you are, what you like to do, how you like to dress. So anything other than that is going to be a shock to them. They're going to be like, that doesn't make any sense. That's not you. That's not how you are. So that's where you have to put in the work and fight for that you. You're going to find adversity. You're going to find people who are going to say, that's kind of weird. Like that, this doesn't seem like you. Are you sure that's what you want to do? Like, this doesn't really seem like you. And they're going to try to place that doubt in your mind. But the reality is that you are the only person who can get yourself there. And so you have to fight for you. Now, creatively, what I found that was very interesting was he brought up the example of, let's say that you want to write a book and you really do want to write this book. You put out the copy, it's selling now, it's out there. The people around you, maybe you went to high school with them, right? And they feel like in high school you were a bad writer. You weren't great at writing. You needed a lot of help. Maybe you used a lot of resources to finish assignments. I don't know. I believe this is the example he used, right? So they have this preconceived understanding that you are a bad writer, that you struggle in writing, that is a trait of yours, and it's immovable, right? But now here you are telling them that you want to write a book, and they're thinking to themselves like, really? Are you sure? Aren't you a bad writer? It's not clicking in their mind that you might have, done the work or gone at it from a different route or have a new perspective. That process isn't going to go through their minds. But a stranger who might just come to you in this current version of yourself with this new manuscript of yours that you're really proud of, they're going to be so eager to read that book. They're going to be like, wow, oh, wow, you used to be bad at writing. I don't even see that. Like, I can't even conceptualize that because of how good that this manuscript is. I feel like we often think about unlearning understandings, unlearning stories that we tell ourselves. This is how we self-sabotage, right? A lot of our beliefs, our limiting beliefs, are set in stone by the age of 7. So really let that sink in. A lot of our limiting beliefs are set in stone, set in our brains by the age of 7 years old. And so adulthood really is just having to go back and unpick all of these pieces apart, saying, oh, wow, I thought I was, a bad friend. I need to unlearn that now. Oh, I was annoying when I was a kid. I'm not annoying now. I need to remember that I'm not annoying now, right? So when we think about having to unlearn these stories for ourselves, I feel like we forget that the same thing applies to these people that we keep around. Their limiting beliefs might also apply to us. Our limiting beliefs extend beyond ourselves. And that's what we need to remember. When we feel unsupported by our, close friends and family, it may not be from a malicious standpoint. It could just be that they cannot fathom you being capable of more than they have already labeled you as. They think that they know our capacity. They think that they know our limits. They think that they know what we're capable of. But the truth is that we are evolving beings. We are evolving people. the human condition is all about transformation and evolution, right? So we are constantly growing, we're constantly learning, and we know that about ourselves. We know this. That's why we often create dreams for ourselves. We create goals for ourselves. We know that if we put in the work, you can get there. If you are consistent enough, if you build routines around that thing, you can get there. But what we forget is that this also applies outside of ourselves. And that's what that reflection is when it comes to people not supporting us, when it comes to people not allowing us to reach that most authentic version of yourself, that reinvention that you want to have. It can be difficult when people think they already know who you are, even if that only has been a reflection of your environment and it's not who you authentically are. We know that we can grow, that we can evolve, that we can change. So we need to apply that philosophy to our close ones. The only thing that I will point out is that this can become difficult when it comes to family, when it comes to differences in generations and differences in age. I feel like this is something that I've dealt with in my personal life where it's a difficult reality to come to a conclusion upon, but the reality is that people of a certain generation may not be as likely to change. They may not be as likely to grow. They may not be as likely to expand their perspective. Their perspective is their perspective, and it's not likely to change. A lot of the time, not always, but a lot of the time that's what we'll deal with our grandparents, with our parents. Sometimes that's just the way that it goes. But I feel like what it comes down to is how willing you are to fight for that you. How willing you are to fight for that destination reality. You're going to find adversity. You might feel alone. You might feel lonely. You might feel unsupported. But how willing are you to fight for that you? How willing are you to fight for that manuscript that you want to put out? How badly do you want to put out that podcast? How badly do you want to start that business? How badly do you want to find a group of friends that really aligns with you? How badly do you want to prioritize your hobbies like traveling? It just depends on how badly you want it and how much you want to fight for you. Because at the end of the day, no one is going to hold your hand and walk you to your goals. No one is going to help you every step of the way to achieving what you want to achieve and to changing your environment and who you surround yourself with. No one is going to walk you through that. The only person who can do that for you is you. To be honest, when I wanted to start this podcast and when I told myself, I'm going to do this podcast, people kind of were not very supportive in my personal life. I think maybe one friend of mine, maybe two friends of mine listened to the episodes. Maybe one of them listened to more than 2 episodes. I didn't really see that much support towards the cause. I didn't really see that many people, running to my new account that I had made for the podcast. I maybe had 1 follower, 2 followers. A lot of these people that I would have considered really close friends in my social circle, nobody really showed up for that. Nobody, and this isn't a sob story. I'm like forgetting who was even in my life when I began it. It's not something that I hold animosity towards or am sad about kicking to my feet or anything like that. But I feel like that's something that would arise that reaction out of a lot of us. If you start that t-shirt company and nobody's purchasing it, nobody is buying it, it can be really hard not to hold that animosity. But the reality is that it may not be malicious. It is really just their limiting beliefs that are extending onto you, and it's not a reason to stop. It's not a reason to give up. The other thing here is that we need to remember that we shouldn't be waiting on others' approval to embark on this transformation, to embark on this reinvention, to embark in this business, prospect. Coming to the beginning of saying, I want to become unrecognizable, that is so much of the perspective of the watcher. It's the perspective of the public. It's the perspective of the audience, right? But we can't wait for others' approval to do something for ourselves. We can't wait for someone to say, yeah, you should reinvent yourself. Actually, you would be really cool in this new version. No, it would be weird for you to even hear somebody say that to you. And the same thing applies when it comes to, starting that podcast or, becoming a DJ or, becoming an author, right? You can't wait for someone to come to you and say, wow, you would be a really, really good writer, so you should actually try to do that. you would make a really, really good DJ, or, you have really good music taste, you should go and do that. The reality is nobody's going to care that much about your creative growth. Nobody's going to care that much about your career. Everybody's got to worry about their own career, their own financial freedom, their own, emotional planets and turbulences, right? Nobody is going to care enough to walk you through your evolution and your growth and your creative pursuits. And so you can't wait for that approval, because a lot of the time it will not come. You can't wait for that support, because a lot of the time it may not come. And if you keep waiting and waiting, and I think Jay Shetty said this actually in his podcast, he said, like, if you keep waiting, you're going to keep waiting. You're going to keep waiting forever. And that really stuck with me, honestly. If you keep waiting for that approval, you keep waiting for that message, you keep waiting for that shove, it may never come, and you may never do anything about it. And so you have to find that willingness, that drive to fight for you. And if you can't fight for you, maybe you don't want it enough, and maybe that's a different story entirely. And so it's important when you're trying to fight for you, fight for that destination reality, fight for that more authentic you that you want to achieve, or your capacity to embark on this new creative pursuit. You need to accept that rejection will come, and it will come in waves, and it will come often. But rejection is redirection, and rejection isn't a sign to stop. It's not a no. It's not a halt. It's a pivot. It's maybe you're asking the wrong person. The Kardashians always said that. If the answer is no, you're asking the wrong question. And I thought that was that's a really good quote. And it shows just how much mentality and willingness and drive can surmount any obstacle. Because look at that matriarchy, really. I think that family, you can say whatever you want to say about them. There are negative things to say about them as well. Billionaires, whether or not that's ethical, probably not, right? But there is something admirable about such a matriarchal family, right? And how powerful those women are, and the empire that they have built for themselves. So if the answer is no, you're asking the wrong person. Rejection is redirection. And sometimes when it comes to finding this authentic you, focusing on this project, even with that lack of support, is that alone time is only going to fuel that growth. It's only going to make it easier for you to hear that inspiration, for you to hear that voice, that voice of your authentic self, calling out to you. And so prioritize yourself. Fight for yourself, because no one else is going to do that for you. Well, this was a very, very short episode. I hope that you guys enjoyed. I would love to hear what you guys thought. Let me know if you enjoy these authenticity, centered episodes. I don't know why I've been drawn to them. Maybe it's a reflection of what I am currently going through. Not to say that there's anything dramatic I'm going through, just it's a reflection of my state of mind, really. But I hope that you guys enjoyed this week's topic. Let me know your thoughts. Any differences in opinions, constructive criticism is also welcome. If you agree with me, all of the above. Don't forget to share this episode with a friend or family member if you think that they could benefit from it. And I am so thankful that you guys clicked on this week's episode. Don't forget to reach out at Kalopsia Pod, KALOPSIAPOD on Instagram and TikTok. Also, it's 1111 here, Make-A-Wish. And at Sydney Jotita, SYDNEYDJOTITA on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. Thank you for watching. See you next Friday. Bye.